Now, I am absolutely dying to hear about this book, Kristian. So it's your latest read.
Mm-hmm.
It's called, what is it called? Something about socialism. Why women
have better sex under socialism.
Okay,
yes.
Women have better sex under socialism.
I think this is the real reward for those who've decided to listen to our boring economics chat.
And now I'm going to find out why us women will have better sex under socialism. Details, Kristian.
And Kristian, can you also tell us if men get better sex under socialism, or is it only women who get better?
No, only women, I'm afraid.
Do men have better sex under capitalism, and women have better sex under socialism?
But yes.
That might explain the divergent perspectives on economics. Go on.
Could well be. So yes, the argument is that under capitalism, women depend financially on men because the market economy is, or capitalism is just inherently patriarchal. And that means they cannot leave unfulfilling relationships because they're trapped for financial reasons. And therefore men have no incentive under capitalism to try harder. And there's also then the effect that under capitalism, the argument is all human relationships become more transactional. So like a market exchange, and people under capitalism think of sexual relations in that way, that the capitalist man thinks, well, I've already paid the bills, I've done my part of the bargain, and then they think they don't also need to be good lovers, and therefore ultimately sexual performance of men under capitalism is going to be lower, whereas socialist man doesn't have that possibility. Women under socialism, the argument goes, are economically independent. They don't have to stay in a relationship they're not happy with. They can leave anytime they want, and they don't have to stay with a man for financial reasons. And that means that men under socialism have to try harder to attract women in other ways. They don't have the economic means to do it. Okay, so far so good. That's for the theory. The hilariously bad part is where she tries to prove this, where she tries to because she has some surveys of in the former Eastern Bloc or in part the then Eastern Bloc. But most of the time, the closest thing to actual evidence for this, let's say, bold hypothesis comes from 3 or 4 surveys where they compare East and West German women in around the time of reunification. There were 3 or 4 surveys where they asked about how satisfied they are with their sex lives, and it turns out the East German women reported a very high satisfaction rate. West German ones significantly less so. Okay, I have no idea what explains that gap.
Killing Germans are underperforming.
Well,
it's the real problem here, Herr Niemietz, the performance of German men.
I am a bit biased, being West German myself.
Really a book designed against you. Yeah.
The trouble is, the participants in that survey, they're students, right? So even on her own terms, this doesn't quite work. Because they're not yet integrated into their economies. So the East German men and women are not integrated in the socialist economy. The West German men and women aren't integrated in the capitalist economy. So clearly, either way, whether you live in a capitalism, socialism, or something else, if you're a student, your romantic relations don't work like that yet. It's not that you're financially dependent on someone as a student.
Methodologically, how do you do a survey where you rate the quality of sex?
I haven't looked at the original source, so I think it's...
Because I mean, this is good to ask somebody that actually works in polling, but also as an individual, your value for sex is different to every other individual, so how do you quantify that?
Yeah, I guess you could say,
I guess you could say
please about anything, really, about, when you survey people about happiness, can you really survey people about happiness? You kind of can, actually. You can generally say, on a scale from 1 to 10, how happy you are, and maybe the scale is the same for asking. I've never looked at questions about quality of sex when it comes to polling. I think it's actually an intriguing empirical issue. You could probably go more broadly. I'd be interested to know if you tried to correlate just more broadly by country and across, let's say you cross-correlated it with the Freedom Index or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's the next paper.
This upcoming paper from Lesh and Niemietz. for the IEA. Why men and women in free countries have better sex? But does that mean that the men in East and West Germany had equal quality sex and it was just the women?
West German actually better, so they were happier. So you could have been called why men have better sex.
So it does seem to me that there is an underlying kind of almost sexist logic to this book, which is it assumes that women aren't working in a capitalist economy.
So I was using my main criticism of this argument is obviously the first part of the foundation of it, which is that, well, of course, in a capitalist economy, women are dependent on men, which is completely untrue. I mean, ultimately, it is financial freedom that allows women to have that kind of physical freedom in itself. I mean, one of my favourite plays is by a Norwegian playwright called The Doll's House, and the entire concept is this woman who becomes more educated and she decides to leave the family and she no longer feels as though she's trapped in her household. And I would argue that when women were allowed to have their own bank accounts, when they were allowed to keep their own money, that was significantly more important in terms of the feminist movement than even the suffragettes and being able to vote Conservative or Labour. I don't think that had significant impacts on women's financial freedom. And fundamentally, capitalism is freedom and allows those women to have the power to leave those abusive relationships or whatever it is.
But Reem, what do you say that the Stasi reading your love letters is the true definition of well, that shows itself?
But you have a better incentive to write good stuff if you know that somebody else is reading it too. There might be audience.
Surveillance is
not just your sex partner that's reading it, there's also the Stasi, so therefore...
And they have experience of doing this all the time.
This is the same, actually, conclusions of some interesting studies that were done in the last few years that I looked at about Bangladeshi women, where there was this whole movement after there'd been some fires in these clothing factories to try to reduce the amount of clothing manufacture, but people call them sweatshops, but obviously relatively kind of low-level manufacturing in Bangladesh. And the result of that, it was thought that this would be great because we could increase the standards and expectations of Bangladeshi factories. In practice, though, the way that international companies complied with this was just to basically pull out their orders from Bangladesh and take them to other countries. The net result of that was particularly bad for women because most of the workers in these factories were women who had previously basically forced to live in a kind of in a matriarchal kind of context where more or less they actually, as is described apparently in capitalism, but is the reality of life living on a farm, which is your entire life as a woman is in control of the man who because the man controls the farm. You spend your whole life living with your first man, which is your father, and then the next man who controls you is your husband. You don't really have your own source of income, your own independence. Whilst when you move from farming based economy to one that's more manufacturing based, you move up on the economic ladder. Women tend to actually have far more choice and freedom and their own incomes. So it does seem like... And
then divorce rates go up as well because a lot of those women end up leaving it. It's interesting when you're thinking about it from that perspective, especially in places like Bangladesh in which they have had those shifts, relatively recently, I suppose.
It's still ongoing shifts as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, especially because the assumption in this book is that women and men will have more financial security under socialism, and that's really the misconception here.
Yeah, and what I've mentioned, these East-West German surveys, that's actually the best, the strongest part, the closest thing to actual data. She then has a couple of surveys from the rest of the former Eastern Bloc, where it gets even weirder. So there's a survey from Hungary, from the as it was then the People's Republic of Hungary, where they're not even asking them about their sex lives. It's just, it shows that they had very judgmental attitudes about prostitution. And she says, well, this is a victory for socialism because that shows they have internalized that sex isn't a commodity that should be bought and sold on markets. And they have these, you could also just say socially conservative attitudes. Yeah. Prostitution is bad. But she interprets that as a victory for socialism. The other one is there's a survey from Poland where there's also a high rate of self-reported sexual satisfaction among women. The trouble is the survey is from 2012. But then she says, this is clearly a legacy of the old Polish People's Republic.
Despite Poland's
literally, Balshorowitz reforms and every deregulation and low taxes, that means Poland is very much not a social country anymore.
The potential issues, by the way, with control, but is there something in terms of they controlling for religion? Are they controlling for other kind of beliefs and historical tendencies? Are they controlling for the jobs people are doing, and therefore how much time they have for extracurricular activities? You know, there seems you want to ask a whole bunch of methodology questions here before you can get on. And I look forward to look at these studies and wonder how robust they are.
No, there's no control for anything. It's just these self-reported satisfaction rankings. The closest thing where that comes into play, the whether people have enough time, is she wrote about this before somewhere in a newspaper or so, and got a letter from a woman who had grown up in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, who said, well, this is not my experience at all, because life was quite rushed. I didn't even have time. And then the author berates that Czechoslovak woman and saying, well, she doesn't realize how good she had it under socialism, and she should check her privilege.
That's insane.
Yeah,
because the other thing as well is there's this whole idea, and perhaps rightfully so to some extent, which is that women were working earlier in socialist countries than they were in Western countries. It was more normalized, it was more accepted. There was this kind of feminism that did exist prior to that happening in the West. But you would think that would then have an impact on how much time people had for those kind of activities. And the other part here as well is women were working because the economies they're very poor, and they kind of women were forced to work or either by circumstance or by active law because of the levels of poverty that would exist otherwise.
I think when you're in the Soviet Union and you're on a collective farm and you're practically starving, I'm not sure that how good the sex would actually be in those circumstances. Well, it's a fascinating read, Kristian, and you have a Substack review coming out on that as well, so we can learn a bit more.
Before we finish up, though, I've asked ChatGPT to do a quick little study looking at the Human Freedom Index and the Ipsos Life Satisfaction Index, perhaps providing a more recent example of it. And it says countries like New Zealand and the Netherlands rank highly in both freedom and life satisfaction, suggesting a potential link between societal freedom and personal relationship contentment. Some nations like Colombia and Thailand exhibit high level of life satisfaction despite not ranking highly in HFI. 67% of high-income individuals reported satisfaction with romantic love life compared to 51% with lower incomes. So get rich and have better love lives, everyone.
There you go. Destroyed with facts and logic.
Thank you.
3 cheers for capitalism.
Three cheers for ChatGPT. The conclusions that we need and writing the upcoming IEA study on the topic.
Absolutely brilliant. Excellent. Well, Matthew, thank you very much. Kristian, thank you very much for joining me today. And thank you to all of you for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this edition of the IEA Podcast and you want to learn more about our work, then check out insider.iea.org.uk.